Hello, everyone. My name is William Plotnick, and I'm the executive director of Cine Limite. Cine Limite is a New York City-based nonprofit organization dedicated to exhibiting Brazilian cinema in the United States with a specific focus on repertory programming. Our organization attempts to spark cultural exchange between the United States and Brazil, and tonight's event is very much in line with that goal. I'd like to thank everybody here for attending tonight's virtual live discussion on the 1970 film O Profeta da Fome, in homage to the legendary Brazilian director, Maurício Capovilla, who very unfortunately passed away recently. While tonight's discussion will focus on O Profeta da Fome, it's sure to also include topics related to Maurício Capovilla's filmmaking career and his impact on Brazilian cinema, cinema marginal, and the work of Jorge Bodanzky. So I encourage the audience attending to be active in the chat and send any questions you may have in the question box. We will be sure to get to your questions throughout and by the end of the discussion. Before getting started, I'd like to call attention to the ongoing closure of the Cinematographer Brasileira, which is Brazil's largest film archive. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Cinematographer Brasileira, which houses thousands upon thousands of Brazilian films, has been closed, with the institution's funding completely cut by the Brazilian government. Today, over a year after it was closed, the institution is not open to the public, and much of its technical systems are no longer in operation. Thanks to the Cinematographer Brasileira, we can watch and exhibit films like O Profeta da Fome. So it's really important to call attention to this ongoing issue. We hope that it becomes resolved soon. I'd like to say a few thanks before we get started as well, and I'll introduce our panelists. Tonight's event was made possible thanks to Gavi Borges and Columbia University. I'd like to thank them both for their continued support of Cine Limite. I'd also like to thank leading Cine Limite programmer and translator Mateus Pestana for agreeing to serve as the translator tonight. If anyone would like to communicate their questions in the chat in Portuguese, Mateus is keeping his eye on it and will help translate those questions for our panelists. We have a very special group of panelists participating in tonight's discussion. To start, Cine Limite co-founder, editor-in-chief, and CEO Eric Barroso will be the discussion moderator tonight. Eric is a film critic and programmer, and he is currently based in New York City. Our second panelist is Ela Bittencourt. Ela is a critic, cultural journalist, and curator in the US and Brazil. Ela writes on art, film, and literature, often in the context of social issues and politics, and runs the film site Lisaria. And correct me if I mispronounced that, Ela.
No, that's great.
Ela is a frequent writer on Brazilian cinema, both contemporary and repertory works, and has been published in places such as Hyperallergic, Art Forum International, Reverse Shot, Movie Notebook, and Film Comment. Our third and last panelist tonight is Jorge Bodanzky. Jorge is a Brazilian filmmaker, writer, and cinematographer. Bodanzky has worked with filmmakers such as Antônio Filho, Aloysio Ralino, Eduardo Escorel, Gerardo Sarno, José Agrippino de Paula, Roberto Santos, Hector Babenco, Roberto Farias, and Raquel Gerber. Bodanzky is the co-director with Orlando Senna of the groundbreaking 1975 film Iracema, Uma Transamazônica, widely considered to be one of the most important Brazilian films ever made. Bodanzky's most recent work is as co-director with Bruno Caldas on the 2020 film Utopia Dystopia. Bodanzky is the cinematographer of Maurício Capovilla's O Profeta da Fome, working closely with the director to realize the style of that film. For that reason, it's really special to have him here with us tonight. So the first thing we'll be doing tonight is showing a clip of the 1970 film called Audacia, directed by Antonio Lima and Carlos Reichenbach. After we show that clip, I'll be passing the baton over to Eric, and he will be leading the discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to play Audacia, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your discussion following the clip. And thank you very much for everyone in the audience. One second while I'm trying to send here. Sorry, bear with me. I realize I'm wearing headphones, so if I show the clip, no one will be able to hear it. Okay.
Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up? Great.
No interior de circo miserável, o diretor Maurice Capovilla filma cenas de O Profeta da Fome. A equipe é pequena, todos trabalham muito. Capovilla ensaia os atores Sérgio Inste e Maurício do Vale. Há muitos anos, o cinema brasileiro abandonou as filmagens em estúdios. Os ambientes naturais são preferidos pelos cineastas porque dão mais autenticidade aos filmes. É preciso muito ensaio para a cena ficar perfeita. O diretor orienta os atores, corrige alguma reação errada, alguns gestos exagerados.
Sorry, bear with me. I hear no one can see the clip, so let me fix that. Let me stop sharing. Okay, can everybody in the audience currently see Audacia right now? Yes, okay, sorry about that. I'm going to scroll back a couple of seconds and then play.
Dr. Maurice Capovilla filma cenas de O Profeta da Fome. A equipe é pequena, todos trabalham muito. Capovilla ensaia os atores Sérgio Inste e Maurício do Vale. Há muitos anos, o cinema brasileiro abandonou as filmagens em estúdios. Os ambientes naturais são preferidos pelos cineastas porque dão mais autenticidade aos filmes. É preciso muito ensaio para a cena ficar perfeita. O diretor orienta os atores, corrige alguma reação errada, alguns gestos exagerados. Cinema é diferente de teatro e televisão. Exige muita naturalidade. O realismo existe até nas cenas mais arriscadas. O cenógrafo Flávio Império criou as roupas, agora faz a maquiagem dos atores. Capovilla ensaia José Mojica Marins e Júlia Miranda. Ele faz o papel de um faquir. Ela é a mulher submissa que o segue sempre. Agora, o ensaio com a câmera. O diretor escolhe o melhor ângulo da cena a ser filmada. Seu trabalho agora é com o fotógrafo Jorge Bodanzky. Cada cena é filmada várias vezes. As repetições são necessárias até que tudo esteja perfeito. São mínimas as condições para se fazer cinema no Brasil. Um cineasta declarou: o cineasta brasileiro é obrigado a transformar a falta de condições em elemento de criação. Por isso, os nossos filmes fazem sucesso no exterior. Os prêmios vêm de Cannes, Veneza, Karlovy Vary, Péssaro e até de Manaus.
Okay. I think we can leave things there. I apologize for any non-Portuguese speakers, but I think the images are what really was most important to give over. With that, I'll turn things over to Eric, and thank you for everyone in the audience. Please feel free to ask any questions throughout the discussion.
Thank you for those introductions, William. First of all, I'd like to say boa noite to everybody on the panel and in the audience right now. I can't describe how happy I am to be able to be part of a transnational panel like this. It's exactly what William and I envisioned for Limici when we started. So I'd like to thank you again for being here. To start off, I'd like to ask Ella a question regarding the figure of Maurice Capovilla and where he fit into the São Paulo filmmaking landscape of the 60s and early 70s, in your view. I find that his early satire in Babel, Garota Propaganda is very of the time, as is the satire in this film, but from project to project, he seems to have a very different variety of interests. So yeah, can you provide us with a word as to like how he really fit in there with the Sconzerlas and Reichenbachs of the world?
Yeah, I mean, his voice is so distinct for me in this film. It's a film I truly love. And I mean, he's just such an amazing figure. From what I understand, someone who, you know, came to Sao Paulo from the interior, who was born in a smaller town, who comes to Sao Paulo, who studies philosophy at the University of Sao Paulo, but is very immersed very early on in cineclubes, so the cineclubs of Sao Paulo, very linked to Cinemateca and all the events that are happening there. Someone who certainly is in the habit of constantly watching cinema, you know, up to 5 movies a day, but is also very involved in social questions of the time. I think signs up with the Communist Party, and at some point is showing films to the factory workers and trying to make that connection there. And someone, that's my sense, and Jorge can speak to that much more, but I think what fascinates me about this film and about Capovilla in general, that it seems like he's very close to cinema novo and to the kind of filmmaking that Glauber Rocha was doing, and to the idea of the aesthetics of hunger. I mean, the prophet of hunger somewhere is inspired by that, but is also verging on cinema marginal. And I guess in a way I see it in the prophet of hunger is having this more ironic stance towards some of the beloved films of cinema novo, which is dealing with hunger and with poverty, and with the Brazilian Northeast, but I think in a way in a much more mythical and a heroic vein. Whereas in the prophet of hunger, there's just there's just so much irony for me in how these scenes are constructed. I mean, there's a certain magic there, but it's a circus. You're following a circus artist around in this movie, a group of circus artists, and it's a lower art. And it's so beautifully done, the way this magic and this kind of heroism and these mythical personalities, you know, they're putting on a show for you, but it falls apart and is deconstructed all the time. So for me, this film is a little bit like a cinema lesson in itself. When I was watching it, I thought I saw a bit of Bergman's Seventh Seal in certain parts. I thought I was seeing a bit of Pasolini's Rallicota when there's the whole Christ hanging scene. I mean, it's just so beautiful to watch. And all of it, I mean, Jorge can speak much more to it because, you know, I understand that Capovilla sold his car, sold his Fusca to be able to make this film, which is very heroic in itself. And so obviously it's a film made with very small, very little means. And yet, I mean, cinematographically, what Jorge and Capovilla have been able to do with the language, with the visual language of this film is just remarkable. I think that's
Completely agree. And with that, I'd like to take it over to Jorge, and to ask, in what context did you first meet Capovilla, and what were your affiliations in São Paulo at that time, and where did he fit in for you, and how did you enter filmmaking yourself? Were you also in these cine clubs? Yeah,
I was also in cine clubs, Sociedade Amigos da Cinemateca, Society Friends of São Paulo Cinemateca. Well, when these films were present by film critics, Jean-Claude Bernardet, Paulo Emílio Salles Gomes, they explained the films to us. I was very young, I was a student, that's before I went to college, and happened something very strange. It was a little note in a Brazilian newspaper, this one here, in the year of 1963, more than 50 years ago. And this was a note to select people for a workshop for documentary film. And I was selected to be part of this. And the professor was Maurice Capovilla, with Jean-Claude and with Paulo Emílio, with Roberto Santos and others. It was, for me, it was the beginning. I made part of this little seminar only 2 weeks, and I have no idea at that time that film will be my interest. Later on, I went to University of Brasilia in a very interesting moment. It was before the military coup of 64. I went to Brazil in 63, the end of this year. And there I have the chance to meet Paulo Emílio again, Jean-Claude, and all these new filmmakers, Nelson Pereira dos Santos. They were beginning to structure the film course. Then comes the military coup. In the first year I was there, and the university was closed. So I went back to São Paulo. I didn't have no idea what to do because I had only 2 years of university, no, a little bit experience as photograph, because I was interested in photograph, and I have the chance to be together with Luis Humberto. It's a great photographer. At that time, we were all very, very young. We were all in the beginning. And there was a German cameraman, Heinz Fortmann. He was a cameraman from Darcy Ribeiro. He filmed, was the first who filmed this Quarup, this Indian funeral. And I was very close to this Heinz Fortmann, and he filmed with a very simple way, 60 millimeters. He cut the films in a projector, and that fascinated me, the way he worked. But I have no chance to make anything in film. So I went to São Paulo, and then again, Capovilla gave me a chance. He chose me to make part of a new group of photographers for a new newspaper called Jornal da Tarde, who was beginning in São Paulo. And the photographs has a chance to have the photos in big dimension and with signed name. Né? It was a new thing in the Brazilian press. And I had not so many experience, but Capovilla had confidence. He gave me this chance. Né? And then I get scholarships to a school in Germany because I am descendant from Austrian. I speak German from my home. And in this school was very interesting. It was the continuation of Bauhaus, the art school of Ulm. And there was a little film department in this school. And the director was Alexander Kluge and Edgar Reitz, later on very important German filmmakers. And it happens again. We were very engaged politically in the revolution of the students who ended in '68. This big movement of the students was beginning in Germany, especially in Berlin. And we made a documentary film about the beginning of this movement. And our students were very, very, very engaged. What happens is the government closed the school. So the second time I lost my chance to study. But Capovilla, again, gave me a big chance. He invited me, come back to São Paulo. I have a good job for you. You will make the camera for my film, O Profeta da Fome. But he didn't get the money to do the film. So it takes 2 years more. He could begin the film. I went back to São Paulo. I make a lot of works as cameraman. I have my experience as photographer, cameraman. But then Capovilla had a little bit money. He said, okay, we get started with the film, Profeta da Fome. And you will be the chief cameraman. You will be responsible for the photography of the film. I never did a big film and a long film. I did only short films before of that. And I accepted this situation. And so we began to work with this project. And that's the reason. And also was another thing. I was teacher in ECA, the School of Arts of the University of São Paulo. And was also a little film department there with the same persons, Jean-Claude, Capovilla, Roberto Santos, Paulo Emílio Salles Gomes. And because he have no money, and also he knows these people, he chose all the technical group from the students of this school. And I was a professor there, but that was also my beginning. I was very, very young and a little experience. What is this experience in Germany? And in Germany, I had the chance to use new cameras, reflex cameras, the newest models we have. And we have the chance in São Paulo to buy new equipment. So I indicated the newest equipment to be bought by the university. So came a new reflex camera with many, many lenses, wide lens, teles. So we have this fantastic equipment. And Capovilla said, okay, we will take this equipment and we'll do the film with this and you will be responsible. That was the beginning. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So before O Profeta da Fome, you shot Hitler no Terceiro Mundo, correct?
No, it was after. It
was after. Oh, interesting.
I'm not sure. It's before or after. I must say, okay. It was the same time, more or less, because Hitler in the Third World War, we took more than 1 year to shoot this film. It's another story. For me, it's the most interesting film, perhaps the most important from the cinema marginal, and Boca do Lixo. How can we translate Boca do Lixo?
I agree, and the reason I bring it up is to ask because I find it to be maybe the most formally intense of the cinema marginal films, and I wonder how much of this early cinematography work did you dictate look of the films you were working on versus José Agripino da Paula in this case, because I find that your early work has a sort of continuation in as you mentioned, the documentary beginnings. You can really tell, but I was wondering as to actually how that conversation went between you and the filmmakers you were working with early on.
We were friends. It was a group in São Paulo, not only filmmakers, but writers and painters and intellectuals. And Agrippino was a writer. And he wrote a very interesting book called Pan America. It's fiction about the political situation, but it's totally fiction. And he said to me, we tried to make a film from this story, but you have no idea about film and have no money also. So when I have Rest's film, we have these magazines in these films, and the magazines normally we didn't shoot through the end. And it was a little bit in the magazine. And I collected these magazines when I was filming other films. And I said to Agrippino, oh, we have enough rests of films, little pieces of film, negative. So we have one day we can shoot. So during more than 1 year, we made this film with little pieces of the films I took out of all other productions without any money. But it's, for me, it's very, it's different from all, but it's engaged in this spirit of this time, the beginning of the military dictator, perhaps the most dangerous moments of the military dictator, but we have courage. We didn't disencouraged from, with the political movement. We made it. And it's as from the aesthetic, it's a little bit similar with Hunger Prophet and the film from Antunes, Compasso de Espera, that I also made in the same times, because it was the same camera, perhaps, and it was also first black and white because we had no money to make it in color, and it's my way to film. But I learned in the University of Brazil, especially with Heinz Fortmann, to make with natural light and to work with a very, very simple way. Only one assistant and hand camera. I began in the beginning till now. I work mostly with hand camera. I like this and sequence plans. So I think when I am shooting, how will be the cutting of this film. So I make my cutting with my sequence plans.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had just a quick question, because I was wondering if you and Capovilla, if you discussed, because it does feel like some parts visually are very different than others. Particularly, there's this kind of floating tactile camera when we are in the country. But it's interesting that you mentioned Bauhaus, because once the action moves to Sao Paulo, there are these incredible shots. I mean, the angles, it's something that you'd imagine seeing in modernist photography. I mean, it feels very different. So I wonder if that's something that you had discussions about, how you wanted to change that or anything like that. Just curious.
No, there was not aesthetical discussions. Capovilla made the film in 10 shots, and he wanted to be, that will be a different visual for each shot. That was the only thing that we discussed about the way the film will be made. For Capovilla, it was important to make it different, make another conception of light for each shot. But perhaps Bauhaus came unconsciously, because my teachers in the University of Brasilia were very well-known teachers also of the modern art, Amélia Toledo, Atos Bulcão, and Bianchetti, Seschiati. There were teachers who was very influenced by Bauhaus. And modern architecture of Brasilia, né? This high contrast of light and shadows. Né?
I also wonder, tagging on to that, how much you had to adapt to the landscape where you were in which you were working, because as Ella just pointed out, it's so various, and you can really tell the difference in the early shots where there is almost entirely or it is entirely natural light in the tents and in the circus, versus the very end where everything gets almost, I would say, overwhelming. So I guess my question is was your strategy just to adapt to whatever you were working with, or did you have these formal principles that you tried to carry out in each project?
It was not so a discussion about the formal, but it's interesting to say following the impression you have. You have a long voyage with the film through all Brazil, and especially Northeast, where it's a very poor region. It was all shot in São Paulo, around São Paulo, in two little cities. Araçariguama is 50, 60 kilometers from São Paulo, and São Luís do Paraitinga, it's more or less 100 kilometers from São Paulo. The two little villages exist today, and we made all the film between these two villages. But we choose different landscapes, so it made impressions. It's a very, very different place, but it was not. It was in the same place.
Yeah. And can I ask you how scripted? I mean, because we saw this little clip, you know, the little video that says, you know, the actors are rehearsing, you know, the time, and you know that the time counts once you're filming, so you're preparing. But I wonder how much of it was written. I mean, obviously you have a little bit of the hunger artist from Kafka, and Capovilla is mixing it with like a story that's like a news story, right? Of someone who was a fakir, who was actually a circus artist. So there's something there, but then there's other material that is much more from kind of a documentary material, no? I mean, there's that moment of an actual festa that's happening. So I just wonder like how much of it was already pre-written and how much of it was kind of improvised and documentary.
It was more improvised. It was the idea to use documentary visions. It should be as a documentary. Even the fiction scenes should be taken as a documentary. So I was very free to put the camera who I want to put and to make the movements I want to do. Capovilla made the scene and said me, "Oh no, you will shoot." He gave me the total liberty to choose what I want to do with light and camera movements. And it was improved and not improved. We have a screen with dialogues, but not all the time he uses. He also improves, especially when we use the populations, local population. It was very improved.
I find it interesting that you say that even the fiction should be shot as documentary, because I find that Capovilla is constantly interested in making this sense of illusion, especially in these circus acts. When we see the record skipping during the lion act, and the fight which ends in Mauricio de Valle's death, as the folk singer sings his tale, he says that the character the fakir is going to lose his second eye, but in fact, Mauricio de Valle gets hit over the head with a rock. Is this something that I guess you shot it all in a sort of impulsive way, right? In a documentary sense. It comes off as very almost uneasy with how close you are these characters in some way, and how this spectacle is built is just broken after being built up for so long.
Yes, when we are, it's a movement, I go to close and around the camera. That was all improvisation. I did it what I was feeling at the moment to capture, as a documenter, to capture the scene. Because I worked many years for as cameraman for journalists, especially for German TV. So I had a good experience as reportage camera. So my camera moves. I like to move the camera. I've hated it in practically all my films. I hate to put it in a tripod and fix the camera. I want to be free with the camera, to register what's happening in front of the camera. And as I said, Capovilla gave me a big freedom, liberty to do it as I was feeling it. It doesn't say take here or they said so. So I was really free to do what I was feeling to do. So it's you could say it's a little bit a docudrama, this film. There's a part of the documentary is in the history of the film. It made part of the film.
That's very interesting. I was wondering about the circus set itself. Was that built by the crew, or did you just come upon
no,
the circus?
It was a circus. This is a real circus. It was failed. It was there. It was abandoned. This was in this village, Araçariguama. The circus was so poor, the people was real hunger, and they abandoned the circus. So Capovilla buys the circus, and to put fire in the circus later on. It was a real circus.
So I guess I'm wondering also, did all of the costumes and the production design of the spectacles in the circus, did those come with what were in the circus, or did Capovilla have a specific idea as to how he wanted these to look, or a specific production designer?
No, it was a very important person in this film. Is Flávio Império. Flávio Império made the customs and the scenery, and he's very talented. It was at the time a very important man. It was from theater he came, Flávio Império, and we worked together with Capovilla, Flávio, and I. We have the same importance in this sense, and Flávio improved with what he had in front. He made very good improvement, and because we have no money to construct anything, we must work with the things we found. That's the way we work at this.
I think this question of improvisation is very interesting, and I wonder, Ella, if what you think about the idea that this film is it's separated into chapters, right? Like there are multiple, actually quite a bit of different chapters, and each one seems to have a different formal style, which I suppose is mostly improvised, or half improvised, half written. The last one, for instance, is styled as a newsreel with a lot of shots of the moon, and you mentioned earlier as how some of these shots are something that seem to come out of modern photography and modernist art, and this mixture of surrealism and satire is very prescient as in what would become postmodernism, and I wonder what you think Capovilla was trying to get at with this variety, with this mixture.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't pretend to know what he was trying to get at, but it's just, for me, it's incredible to see. I mean, somewhere, and Capovilla was also someone who was close to the theater, as I understand, right? There was Teatro Atena that he was involved with, and Teatro Oficina was very powerful. I mean, continues to be. And so it's a mix, and that plus Jorge's incredible kind of aesthetic, also art influenced eye. I mean, it's not so much that the parts are distinct, but it's just that you have so many different languages that permeate each other. So you can be very theatrical with very little means. I mean, I feel like in the circus, for example, there are some incredible scenes where there's a magic being constructed and it's happening in the dark and it's happening in close-ups. But there's this incredible moment when the camera suddenly pulls out and we just see that it's kind of like a bunch of plastic chairs hanging out. Suddenly this magic is gone. It's this kind of more objective, almost documentary view of what's going on, and the camera does it so well. And sometimes I almost feel like it's Capovilla's theatrical sense a little bit, that you create something, but like that scene where you're in the circus and the act goes wrong and the audience gets furious and it's essentially a riot. I mean, it's kind of incredible that when you take that scene a little longer, then, you know, I mean, the scene is so long that at one point it almost feels like, oh, we're no longer just doing this narrative bit. Suddenly the scene became much bigger. It's about something else. And of course, to do that in 1970, to have this kind of an open uprising of the audience, you know, it feels very political. It feels so alive. And the camera is doing that all the time. And so, yeah, there's newsreel. I wonder if Jorge could speak to that a little bit, because when you ask me like where to position this film, the other thing that strikes me as incredible is that this is the time where it seems like Latin American cinema from country to country is also very rich in terms of this new language of documentary cinema that's coming in. I think Fernando Bihi is at some point from Argentina, comes to Sao Paulo, and then Maurice Capovilla goes to Argentina and they study there. And it just feels like Latin American cinema is also feeding off of each other. No, I don't know, is that your sense, Jorge, of this kind of closeness of languages and exchanging ideas at that time?
Well, there are a lot of influences. No? There was the Italian cinema, né? Or the Nouvelle Vague in France. And for me, for some documentaries, very important Jean Rouch. Né? We were great admirers of Jean Rouch with Cinéma Direct, né? Cinéma Vérité, né? To make political films, né? Using this way to film with 16 millimeters and an Agra, so you can shoot it with direct sound, very heavy, simple equipment, with a very little team. And more or less it was the same vision, especially the same political situation also in Latin America. All these countries fall to a military dictator: Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, né? Bolivia, all were military dictators. So we have the same enemy, we have the same condition to work. And that's perhaps makes to observe, to look what is other done. And there was not so many films to see and to choose. So you must work together. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I thought of that. It seemed like at that time there were also questions with newspapers and, you know, television kicking off and being more powerful. There were more questions of like how poverty is being represented. Luis Ospina a little later will make that film Vampires of Poverty, where there are questions of how media represents the poor and how these kind of very scandalizing images are being created. So that seems like also a common theme. Yeah.
Yeah, as I said to you, I worked for the German TV, so I was inside the political situation. Yes? I was in Chile when Allende falls, and I was in Bolivia when Banzer made the military coup. I was there as a cameraman. So the political situations was inside us. It's impossible not to see it.
I wonder if, because I guess Capovilla mentioned that some viewers, when this film was first shown, were confused about, or like were not sure about that part where the man lands on the moon. And today, it's of course one of the greatest parts in the movie. It's what makes it current and fresh. The idea that, you know, this reality of the circus and of the poverty can exist at the same time as this, you know, super scientific achievement. But could you talk a little bit about that? Did you guys have a discussion about that little?
That was the idea of Capovilla, of course. I didn't shoot his films, and I think he wanted the contrast. This big technical acknowledgement, and this poor figure of the hunger prophet, and I think he wanted this contrast. Because the story is interesting to explain. It's a real story, more or less, because it's a real figure. It existed, this Ali Khan, and Capovilla worked for newspapers, and he collected this history. So this documentary characteristic or documentary way to see it, it comes from the work from Capovilla as journalist. At that moment, he abandoned journalists later on, but at that moment he was a journalist. And for a journalist, the great picture at that moment was the Man in the Moon. It was in the Man in the Moon was 69, and we shot it in 70. So in the same year it was happening at that moment.
Yes, and we see Giulio Bressani use the same images in O Anjo Nasceu. So I find it interesting coming from newsman's background, this collaboration with José Mojica Marins. And I find this to be a doubly interesting project for Mojica, because as Edu shown, he's often torturing others for pleasure or revenge or whatever sadistic reason he's playing out. But here he's almost torturing himself for the spectator. How did he come to the project, and what was your experience with him? How did he and Capovilla know each other? I know he was a huge figure for the São Paulo film scene in general, but what was your experience with Mojica directly?
With Mojica? Oh yes, Mojica was a very well-known figure in this cinema boca do lixo, this cinema marginal. He did films before, he was a known figure. And he was more or less this character. For Mojica, it was very simple to play this role because he was a little bit so. And with his big nails, finger nails, they are authentic. You could not break them. That was a great problem. If you not to break the nails of Mojica. And it exists a type like this Ali Khan. It was in the center of São Paulo. Is that a bus? I saw it. That was not inside the bus, but I saw it. Everybody who passed in the center of São Paulo saw this bus. And this Ali Khan who get money, people sing how he hungers. Everybody knows that at night he will eat something. But it was a spectacle. It was and Capovilla made this, use this idea of hunger to make this the reality of Brazil with this fiction of this figure. Of Ali Khan. It's an allegory. I don't speak how you do it in English. It's allegory.
Allegory.
Yeah.
I love the idea though that they decided, that Capovilla decided not to use the voice of Mojica because he thought that would somehow be too, I don't know, that it would be too identifying. So it's someone else's voice, right? It's the actor. Am I wrong about that?
But what? I did understand.
That he was dubbed, that it's not Mujica's voice in the film. Is that correct?
No, it's Pereio who made the voice.
Exactly. Pereio,
Yeah.
who is the actor in Your Irasema, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, which is, I mean, it's beautiful. It's very interesting but that just goes to show that there's so much preparedness in this film. I mean, there's just so much constant thinking of how this film, because I mean, the music is also remarkable. There are just
Yes, the
so
music
many
is
parts of
very,
this film that are incredible, right?
yeah. The music is fantastic in this film. Two music. The music was written for the film, and this guitar player, Adalto Santos, is also fantastic. And I don't know if he composed this music for the film. I think so. He did it for the film, Adalto Santos.
Did Adalto Santos usually wear the cangaceiro uniform? We have a question in the chat asking about the cantador, wondering if it was a nod to Deus e o Diabo na Terra do Sol, or if that was just how he dressed normally.
Now, this kind of singer have an allusion to cangaceiros. It was not only Deus e Diabo. Deus e Diabo uses this. Glauber didn't create these figures. These figures exist in the Nordost. As these singers, mostly without vision, and they use these heads of cangaceiros. Of course, in the film, it's over a little bit. It's exaggerated, this figure, intentionally, by Flávio Império. He took this idea and created over this.
It's interesting to bring up Glauber because obviously he penned the original Aesthetics of Hunger text, and I mean, hunger is obviously central to the film that we're discussing tonight, and everything in the film is driven almost by the lack of food. Everything the fakir does, certainly, he forfeits his eye for lack of bread. He buries himself alive after his woman's uncle dies of hunger and undergoes a funeral procession, and then he comes to realize that hunger is the one thing that he has true control over and decides to monetize it. You spoke earlier, Jorge, about this being an allegory for Brazil at the time, but I wonder if it is also an allegory for the young filmmakers who could not get funding or were censored, going through this almost hunger of filmic representation and production.
It's difficult to say this because our social class, for the filmmakers come, they have no hunger. So it's not a personal hunger.
Right.
It's really an allegory, and not as think what it was happening personally with the people who made the film.
Could you talk a little bit about like what was the reception of this film when this film showed? Because again, cinema marginal films had so many different stories. Some of them could only show to very few people. Some of them then were not shown and forgotten for years. Like, what was it like when this film was first shown? I imagine in São Paulo.
I have no idea where, but it was very bad distribution. There existed at that time no distribution for this kind of film. It was at the time of porno chanchada. These films get on nas salas de cinema, but Profeta da Fome and other films, there doesn't exist at the time. Film festivals also only one or two, and these international festivals also. Very, very few Brazilian films go outside. I don't know, but who saw this film? He became more seen later on.
Well, it was.
And there existed something interesting to say at the time was a very strong movement of cineclubes, film clubs, as yours, film clubs. And these film clubs were not subjected for the censorship. They could show these films, and it was a movement from the church, comunidades eclesiais de base, from the student movement, Sindicato dos Jornalistas. So all have film clubs, and existed at the time a distributor for film clubs called Dina Filmes. And these films go to all Brazil, when 16 millimeters copies, and were shown in all Brazil. That was the way to show these films. No?
I wonder, circling back to cine clubs, you mentioned that in your youth you attended them yourself. What were the major influences, movements that really stuck with you while you were there? You mentioned Paulo Emilio Salas Gomez being one of these mentors.
Paulo Emilio Salas Gomez, he is a great mentor for all a generation of filmmakers. Né? And he make us to pay attention for the Brazilian films, né? Because the Brazilian films were ignored. The Brazilian films are all extremely intellectual as cinema novo, or were porno chanchadas, as extreme. Né? And São Paulo was a little bit by sides. Né? São Paulo had no money, no visibility, the film in São Paulo. Né? Also, the cinema marginal and cinema boca do lixo were really marginal. Né? It doesn't. People in Rio didn't know what was happening in São Paulo at that time. Né? And it was a very local movement. You know? And the way the cine clubs, the cine clubs show all these films. Né? And the Cinemateca was also as a cine club. Né? The screenings at the Cinemateca. Né? The society of friends of Cinemateca. But there were other people, not more.
We have a question for Ela. Ela, could you talk a bit about filmmaking during the military dictatorship in Brazil? What was the risk for filmmakers who made revolutionary cinema like O Profeta? Was allegory what kept a film under the radar from the censors versus the work of owning São Paulo?
I mean, that's an excellent question. I'm thinking, I guess, when the great Brazilian film historian Ismael Xavier, when he wrote about Glauber Rocha, I guess he wrote about the allegories of underdevelopment. So there's no doubt that allegory was very important in Brazilian cinema, although I think someone like Glauber Rocha, I mean, certainly the authorities were not, we're certainly applying heat, I mean, in the sense of not outright censoring his films, although, I mean, Jorge, you can correct me with which of the films of Glauber Rocha that I don't recall right now would have been censored. But there's no question that there were filmmakers who were going abroad at that time, right? I think it was different with Cinema Marginal because Jorge pointed out that the circuit where the cinema existed was so small that it often simply passed under the radar, right? I mean, so sometimes there's this feeling, and this is not unique to Latin America, right? When you talk to Eastern European filmmakers on the other side of the world, what it was like, there was this feeling that sometimes you're making films for a small circle of your friends, but at the same time, this is something that's keeping you alive. And so that keeps your fervor of why cinema is essential, why it's important to make cinema, even if your films are not immediately being seen. I think that Cinema Novo was in a different situation because those films had an ambition to reach a much wider audience. They were films made with different budgets and they were seen, and therefore I think censorship was paying more attention to them, where Cinema Marginal had this small channel where they could kind of slip by through the cracks.
Yes, it's very marginal. So the dictatorship didn't see what was doing there, you know. Mhm. It was more preoccupied in the moral censorship from the pornochanchada. Né?
I want moving on from this or not, I mean, connected to this question of censorship, I wanted to ask Georgie about your own experience with Irasema and the censorship that faced. It's my knowledge that it was shot in 74, but it wasn't shown in Brazil until around 1980. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but please, what was your experience with the censors at that time?
It was not officially censored because it was, the censor said it's not a Brazilian film. It's okay, you think what you want. Né? But the film was shown in this circuit of cineclubs. We have 4 or 5 copies who go to all Brazil. Né? In this movement, at that time exactly, né? In the 70s, né? This movement was very well organized, the cineclubs. And Irasema was shown in the cineclubs. I think, the censorship is they don't know what to do. They didn't know what to do with this film. And every time we try to get the liberation, they say another thing. And once I have no patience. I went to Brasilia with the film in my hand and went to the Department of Censorship and put it in the table. Please say me, is it censored or is not censored? Take a position about this film. Né? And they said, no, we can't look at this film because it's not Brazilian.
Okay, I'm gonna take one more question from the chat. William wants to know about your experience with Mauricio du Vallet. It's such a perfect role for him in some cases. I mean, his sort of hulking frame is very good for a lion tamer. So how was Mauricio? And did you work with him again after Profeta?
I don't not remember if I worked again with Mauricio. Perhaps yes, not as a principal role, but Mauricio was very popular. Everybody wants to work with Mauricio. Né? It's a well-known figure in the Brazilian theater and film. Mm-hmm. But marginal. Né? It's not as it's not a star. Mm-hmm. There were no stars, film stars, in this kind of film movement. Yeah?
Carly also has a question about the scene at the end of the film when Mojica is lying down on the spikes in the middle of a very crowded street in São Paulo. It clearly caused a large commotion. She asks how you managed to shoot this kind of scene, I suppose in all the commotion.
Oh, it's as a documentary. Yes? They construct the scene, and I was free with the camera to register to make a documentary for what was happening. Yes? That was the way. Yes? You see, there's no special thing. So I think people thought it's a real thing, what's happening. Eh?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, with that, if Ella or anyone in the chat have any more questions, if not, I would like to thank everyone here for coming. This was lovely and I hope edifying for everyone involved. Thank you, Georgie. Thank you, Ella. Thank you, Mateus.
Thank you, everyone.
And I'll toss it off to William.
Yeah, I just wanted to also extend my thanks to Ella, Jorge, Mateus, even though we didn't need your amazing translation skills, thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you, Mateus.
My pleasure.
I wanted to say that O Profeta da Fome will continue streaming on our website until tomorrow night. So people have the opportunity to watch the film following tonight's talk. And for the person asking my membership, okay. Yeah, so once again, thank you so much. We're going to post this conversation. Thank you, Max. We're going to post this conversation online. We also are going to do our best to translate it into Portuguese. So transcribe everything and translate it. We're posting that. So I look forward to sharing that, and more people will be able to hear from it. So yeah, once again, Mateus, Ella, and Jorge, thank you so much for coming tonight and speaking about O Profeta da Fome. It's very sad thinking about the loss of Maurice Capovilla, such a great figure of Brazilian cinema. But I think this is a really beautiful homage to the director being able to come together and speak about his work. And we very much hope that more of his films can be shown, translated, restored, and we can continue this discussion at a future time about the legacy of Maurice Capovilla's cinema. So with that, I'm gonna close this session and thank everybody once again.